First one is quadratic funding. Quadratic funding, without going too much into details, because I can probably talk a lot about it, is a new way of funding public goods. So one of these issues with crypto and decentralization and DeFi and everything is that we're creating public goods. So just like water, just like oil, just like air, these are public goods. Nobody owns them. And when we're looking at a collaborative future and a P2P system, I talked about it in one of the videos that I was comparing labor and capital and how does it affect the future of labor. I'll link it in the video, I'll link it above as well. And one of these things, one of the ways for us to succeed as an ecosystem is to start producing more public goods that everyone can use. So examples of public goods would be stuff like having good UI, having educational materials, having good technological stacks that is part of these Money Lego or compostability features so that we can grow the ecosystem. And how do we do that? We need funding. We need funding from the public. And so quadratic funding now becomes a new way of funding public goods. So it works in a very simple way. Quadratic is just squared, right? So what is a quadratic function? A quadratic function is something like that. So it increases by a lot, as you can see. So one idea of quadratic funding is that there is a pool of donation money waiting to be distributed to people. Okay? So how do we judge how much to distribute? So let's say I've got a charity pool and I have $100. It's a very poor charity. So I have a pool of $100 and I'm going to allocate to, let's say, 5 projects. Now, one way is to divide it equally. So 100 projects, $100, I've got 5 projects, each project receives $20. That's one way. Or the other way is to allow the community to vote, or allow the community to somehow vote for what they are enjoying, what they like. So this is where quadratic funding comes in. So we start off, we have this curve that goes up like that, and then for every individual, everyone funds some amount of money, and how do we allocate this $100 is that we want to square as you can imagine, quadratic is square, right? So we want to square the contribution and then allocate money equally. So without going into too much details, the idea is that as more people are supporting, so we have 5 projects and we have project A, B, C, D, E. So let's say most people are supporting project A, and so we want to allocate more money to project A, and we allocate it in a squared manner. So the more sophisticated explanation is that you have the sum of the square, and then you have the sum of the root square. Basically, the idea is that this quadratic funding now becomes a more efficient way to be allocating these funding to different projects that the community has voted for. So in an economics term, it becomes a very interesting binding mechanism to be rewarding and funding the right kind of projects based on what the community has voted. So once again, the idea of quadratic funding is very simple. Based on the votes or based on the donations that the project has, then the more votes or the more donations that the project receives, the more funding in an exponential term the project will receive. So that's the idea of quadratic funding.